Alright, so right now we're trying to see if Prodigy of Mobb Deep's first solo album, the H.N.I.C, which is an acronym for the head nigga in charge, is a classic. If you're watching this today, rest in peace to Albert Johnson, Prodigy of Mobb Deep. He passed away today at the age of 42, one half of the Queensbridge duo Mobb Deep, the infamous Mobb Deep. So if you're familiar with the early 90s to mid 90s hip hop, you'll be familiar with their work, a lot of the things that they did, and the sound that they helped introduce and carve the golden era of the 90s that influenced a lot of rappers that you may be hearing today. To dig deeper into Prodigy of Mobb Deep, he's done several albums. He has a very extensive catalog. You know, H.N.I.C Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Return to the Mac, you know, several albums. I'll have them all listed on the screen so you can get a full feature of what he has done. So the H.N.I.C was his first album, but it was not his last album. Prodigy of Mobb Deep by himself probably carries a body of work just as big as Mobb Deep. So what I want to really focus on was that the one album that he dropped, actually his first solo project in the early 2000s, right before the hip hop scene and the music business just really took a turn for the left, where the digital era started coming in, the Atlanta hip hop started really taking off, and you know, and the rap just started really changing for what it is, what we know for today. But Prodigy, he dropped the H.N.I.C, which I believe is to be the last real hip hop album to ever come out at the turn of the millennium. And that's probably a real strong statement, but when you look at it and from the point of view that he was coming from, giving you that straight grimy street hip hop right off the heels of murder music, and when you combine that with the climate that was currently going on in hip hop, he was trying to really hit you hard like, no, the street grimy rap was not going away. This wasn't one of the best promoted albums. I don't really know the budget they had behind promoting the album, but just to see the route that they did take or the approach on promotion, I could feel it wasn't one of those multi-million projects that they were really invested into. But it still did 100,000 the first week. It still finished off in the year 2001 as a certified gold album. So he did make that accomplishment as an artist, which is phenomenal. Gold, platinum, you know, platinum was always the high standard that everyone was reaching for then, but gold for this type of project and the way it was released and the impact that it had on the hip hop community and the fans of Mobb Deep, that gold was damn near diamond. So let's really look at the feature list that he had on here. It wasn't really anybody outside of that Queensbridge circle that you really saw or familiarized yourself with when you dealt with Mobb Deep. It was the Noid, the Chinky, Havoc, Cormega, Bars and Hooks, Littles. So you know, there was definitely all that crew and their entourage being spread amongst the album, but it wasn't in the way that you would think it was like a featuring all these other these artists. It, you know, like a lot of these features weren't spread out. So it wasn't like Noid on 5 songs, Chinky on 2 songs, Havoc on 6 songs. They were really like condensed features. So you got like about 3 of them on 1 song, you know, really like collective pieces of work that they really came in, collabed, and really carved out something really classic. So first, when you look at it from the production point of view, this is probably one of the best produced albums of its time. And it might have went overlooked for a lot of people, but we're gonna break down the production aspect of it right now. So people who didn't know the producers, who was on the album, or the depth of the production that was taking place, we're going to give you that right here. So don't worry about it. We're going to take care of everything. On Prodigy's first debut album, he went and produced 8 of his own songs. That is unheard of at this time from someone who's not known of being a producer, say like Havoc. So on these 8 songs, say four of them were like skits and intros. So we'll count the intro and outro and 2 to 3 skits. But on the more standout songs that Prodigy himself got his hands on in producing, he had a co-production credit on YBE, Young Black Entrepreneurs. Really dope song. That was one of my favorites. Genesis, that was a crazy one as well. That was one of, I believe, the 2nd or 3rd song on the album that really set the tone. So I'm telling you, crazy track. And Can't Complain featuring Chinky. So, you know, these were really standout records that he produced. It wasn't really like, you know, some fillers. That's the best way I could really look at it. He wasn't there producing filler throwaway tracks. This was Prodigy actually getting down, no, this is for my album. I'm about to cook up something fire that I'm gonna rap to, other rappers are gonna wanna rap to, and people who appreciate rap is gonna listen to it and feel the same way I felt making it. So big shouts to him there. And then when you look down the list of production, we have Alchemist. Alchemist produced 4 tracks on here. So you know the most notable, Keep It Thorough, but then we have 3, and then we have Trials of Love that he did produce, and he produced the Veterans Memorial. So big shouts to Alchemist there, because you know there's a lot of dope production that didn't really stand out, that people didn't really know outside of Keep It Thorough that he did. And you know, some of my favorite sleepers on this album as far as production goes, and I figured this out years ago, but this is a good gem for producers today if you didn't know. Let's say We're Going Diamond on the album for Prodigy's H.N.I.C. That was produced by Jersey's own Just Blaze. Shout out to Just, laying it down. Crazy track then, still holds weight today. That's what you call a timeless song. You know, not this timely music that we get now that you hear and it's done and you're done with it, you know, as it drops. But then from there, we have Bink. Let's literally think about it. Yes, VA Grammy nominated Bink was on Prodigy's H.N.I.C. album, and he was in the first 4 to 5 songs. He did produce Rock That, Rock That Shit, I Need That Shit. Yes, that was produced by Bink. Big shouts to him, you know, and that was a dope song. Havoc later on, I think remixed it to produce Bump That. So, you know, if you remember Bump That from Havoc, that hook was actually from original from Prodigy's album, The Rock That, produced by Bink. So big shouts there. Don't forget Easy LP on the title track, H.N.I.C. Crazy track, crazy samples. So, you know, I'm gonna try to have the samples listed along the side for the producers out there who wanna know. So go in there, get your dig on. But you know, this is just like, when you look at it from the producer's ear, how I was looking at it, this was a very well produced album. So you have Prodigy himself producing 8 tracks, 3 of them being standout tracks, the skits and whatnot. 4 from Alchemist, then you have 1 from Bink, then you have the title track from LP, and then don't forget you have Rockweiler. Rockweiler produced 2 tracks on there as well. It's on there. Rick Rude had 2 joints on there. We have Bink, LP, Alchemist, and Prodigy himself. So, and Just Blaze. So when you look at this collection of work, it's like, wow, just from a production standpoint, this album was solid. This was solid from production. Just from an instrumental standpoint, you could pull this album up today in 2017 and still rock these beats. I'm not even saying this as a fan, you know, rest in peace to Prodigy for laying this classic down, but his selection for beats were impeccable. That's one thing you cannot take away from him. And then on top of that, since we're on the topic of beats, big ups to Prodigy that a lot of producers did not know. If you read his book, Prodigy was part of the reason that Havoc started making beats. So Havoc started producing on the Hell on Earth album, I believe. That was the first album entirely produced by Havoc. All Mobb Deep production. Then on Murder Music, he carried it on there as well, but you know, he had songs from Alchemist, he had songs, you know, there was a few outside production on there as well, but a lot of the production moving on from Hell on Earth onto the Murder Music projects, a lot of that was carried through by Havoc, and that influence came from Prodigy. Prodigy showed him how to use the MPC, taught him how to make this stuff, taught him how to make beats. I'm telling you, you guys should really check out this Prodigy book. It's a really good read. You know, some of the standout tracks on this album, you know, I'm gonna cover right now, because like I said earlier, he didn't have a lot of features on here. So when you look at some of these some of the songs on here, so let's go back. He only had Nori, Littles, Noid, Havoc, Cormega, Bars and Hooks. So the standout tracks right now on the album, What You Rep featuring Nori. Crazy. So let's really talk about this right now. When you go back and analyze What You Rep by Prodigy, this was ahead of its time. It was a crazy track, crazy lyrics, crazy beat. You know, just a lot of elements of just dirty, grimy hip hop from the 90s just being permeated through the waves when you heard that. So, you know, it was just one of those old school boombox, black radio type joints. Like I said, man, people who heard that back then, the climate is totally different now. Granted, the album will still hold up, but it's just a whole different feel. You know, if you grew up in that time, it's actually listening to like a actual a time capsule. You just start and when I say time capsule, I'm not saying it in any way to make it sound dated. The people who grew up in that time will understand it was theme music. So when you put on the H.N.I.C today and you listen to it, this was the theme music for the year 2000. That winter, you know, when you was going in from November to that early spring, and that even carried through into that summer. This is how albums rocked. Let's really talk about it. The summer of 2001, they were still bumping H.N.I.C. So let's think about it. It came out, the end of the year 2000. So 2001, we were still bumping that. We were still bumping that, carrying over strong, very strong. So you know, it's like this was beyond the album that people really you know, analyzed it to be. So the standout tracks on the H.N.I.C to me was What You Rep featuring Nori, We're Going Diamond, Genesis, YBE, Young Black Entrepreneurs, title track H.N.I.C, Keep It Thorough, and Can't Complain. Now, those songs are just a few of my favorites. Now, people watching this or fans of Prodigy Mobb Deep could probably have their own favorites as well. But when you just listen to those, that could just give you just a taste of what the album had. And just before I even forget, this wasn't even a short album. This album that Prodigy produced was not a short album by any stretch of the imagination. This was still at a time where people gave you a 19-20 track album. Remember, he had 5 to 6 skits on this album. He had an intro, outro, and 2 to 3 skits, interludes. This was an album by the 90s hip-hop definition. So when it dropped into 2000, you gotta understand, this was the last real hip-hop album. Hip-hop albums don't give you outros, intros, 3-4 skits anymore, 15 quality songs, 3 verses, 2 hooks. They don't do that anymore. Let's really think about it. Real hip-hop heads who grew up on this stuff, who relate to me right now, they could tell you, they don't do that anymore. This is a dying art form, dying craft in itself, you know? Like, they just 2 verses, 2 hooks, the song's done, maybe a feature, but that's a record now, you know? We're talking songs at like 3 minutes, 4 minutes, you know, good records right here. So, but when you just look back at the collection of work and you look back at Prodigy's career, what he has done and able to bless hip hop with and be able to come from that golden era of hip hop in the early 90s, he was able to be part of these classic beefs, Jay-Z, Tupac, you know, give us a classic album, H.N.I.C, be part of a classic duo, Mobb Deep, drop a classic album with Mobb Deep, Murder Music, go platinum, Hell on Earth, you know, and give us just multiple classic albums with Mobb Deep. And then collectively, together with Mobb Deep, drop over 15 projects over a span of probably 15 to 20 years. This is just incredible when you look at somebody's career. So when you just take that into note, just to paraphrase, Prodigy of Mobb Deep, he may not be mentioned in people's top 5, but I will say it now, he's definitely a top 10 MC when it comes to hip hop, or at least carving hip hop for the East Coast. Because when hip hop was going through its trials and tribulation in the 90s, Mobb Deep was one of those most notable groups that hip hop fans of that era could relate to. Shook Ones, when that comes on, there's nobody in the world that grew up in that era that don't get chills when that beat drop. You already know, it just symbolizes grimy hip hop, the 90s. Now, the thing that made Prodigy and Mobb Deep such a staple and an icon in hip hop, they were part of so many influential beefs that took place over the years. Like in the mid to late 90s, when they had the East Coast, West Coast beef with Pac and Biggie, people may not realize, but Mobb Deep was on the front lines of that. They made a response record to the West Coast where they were getting at the East Coast. They made LA, teamed up with Capone and Nori, dropped that. You know, they were definitely on the front lines. They were not looking at it to be chumped by the West Coast or any coast, especially when it came to hip hop. So, you know, big shouts to that. So for no second disagree with me on the fact that this H.N.I.C album that Prodigy released was a classic. So we could debate it in the comments, and that's exactly what I want you guys to go. I'm gonna be in the comments with you guys. Let me know as far as what your thoughts and discussions were. But when you look at it from a production standpoint, this Prodigy H.N.I.C album was a well-produced album. Therefore, it was a production classic. Then when you look at it from a lyrical point of view, he delivered on every song. He did not skimp on the bars nor the content, so therefore it was a lyrical classic. And then when you look at it as a body of work, in hindsight, from the day it was released almost 17 years ago to now, and to listen to it and how it stands up to some of the albums that dropped recently or compared to what albums it came out with at that time. Therefore, that body of work still resonates with hip-hop fans, ones who are familiar or love the 90s hip-hop and those who grew up on the 90s hip-hop, and that gives it the third standing, therefore, of a body of work of a classic. So if you have any disputes, discussions, or if you want to continue the debate, please let me know down below in the comments. But don't forget to like and subscribe. This is the first episode. I will be doing more. So if you want some more content like this or want me to touch on other artists or just albums or just breakdowns, let me know. But until next time, this is your boy Piff Beats for Daily Heat Check TV. Sign up and subscribe, and we're out. The hip hop debate.